The sea tasted of iron and old rain as the black dragon left the memory of a burning throne and sailed the sky on his own broad shadow. He climbed until the world fell away to blue and a bent silver line. Then he flew east because something in the bones of the world kept calling. Some old note thrumming up through air and light and the clutter of clouds. He did not think in words. He remembered heat, the tang of a woman's hair beneath his tongue, the press of her knees along his ribs, a name shaped like a bell, a promise that was a taste of copper and sunlight. The call was older than that. The call was stone. Storms drew their curtains and he tore them. He skimmed wave tips until his wingtips blew white rain off the swells and fish leapt in panicked arcs. Dolphins followed at a distance, bright as blades. Long, deep nights found him a dark sigil on horizons. His fire an orange bloom on the underside of clouds. He slept on small islands where the palms bent like old men and woke to the world trembling with the first little earthquakes of morning. Sometimes other things woke him. The sharp, sweet stink of men on boats, their paint, their oils, their hammered iron and butter, their hungering. If they lifted long black bows, he rose and was gone. If they lifted horns that sang wrong at the edge of hearing, he turned and rolled and came down like the end of a story, and the horn's song turned to ruin and ash. He crossed the sea-scarred bones of old cities where rivers ran green with weeds through empty squares and statues wore helmets of heron nests. He drifted on thermals over deserts that glittered with old glass. He traced the smudged ribbon of a road raised higher than the land around it, too straight for the world, a black seam stitched through time. And then, when the world's east seemed only more world, the smell came. It crawled out of distances, a stink of sulfur and damp stone. The air itself took on the taste of a kettle burned dry. The smoking sea, the skin over the old wound. He circled its bruise. He saw islands that were hollows of ash, sharpened ridges like the backs of sleeping beasts. Plumes lifted from the 14 flames, though only 7 were steady and true. The rest coughed in their sleep. He passed a shoal where the sea frothed green, and black shapes like the shadows of ships beneath ice turned and turned without ever rising. He heard, carried on the wind, the ruined clink of chimes from a tower that had learned to ring for no one. He took the voice he had tasted and followed it down. Where caves had been vented to the sky by the force of some forgotten breath, he found an opening. A ledge of rock offered itself, hard as old iron. He clawed at it and felt the clatter go down and down, slipping away in 1,000 small echoes. He folded his wings and let gravity have him. Heat rose like a tongue to meet him. He banked in tight circles toward an underworld of red light and black rivers. He landed at last on a platform of cooled obsidian. Its sheen rippled as if a hand had touched it when it was soft. The air tasted of coins. There were bones, not human, not all of them. Some were too long by half, some were too wide. Above him, threaded across a vault of stone, a long vein of something pale ran like ice. It caught the light of his throat when he loosed a little breath and glowed like a promise. He knew, without knowing that he knew, that once there had been hands here, hands as soft as the belly of a fish and as greedy. Those hands had put the pale vein here as a marker, like a claw scratch that said, "Here." The eggs were deeper. He found them as a dog finds buried food, with the parts of himself that are older than dogs, older than food. He found a hall where the ceiling had been carved into a sky of dragon's wings, and at the hall's heart was a bowl of stone, a place where prayers had gone once and screams and laws. Within the bowl lay shapes that were not stones, though they had been stones so long that the bowl had forgotten. He crossed the basin and dragged his great foreclaw along one. Sound sang up into his arm and through the plates of his chest. It went to the small cracked city that was his heart and came back changed. Onyx, veined with faint ember lines as thin as hair. Another lay next to it, the color of slate after rain. Another was dark gold. They were not small. He laid his chest across them as if the past could be warmed, as if a forgotten house might be coaxed again out of quarried ruin if only someone breathed for long enough on its doorway. Men found him the next day. They came with their shadow on the water and their oars working slow, slow, slow. The sea filled the cavern's mouth with a sound like a kettle boiling. 3 boats slid through, each painted with a long-eyed woman along the prow. They had shaved heads and bare arms oiled against the heat. 3 of them wore red around their throats and had set the color on their mouths with care. The woman standing at the first prow did not flinch when she saw him. She raised a horn. He had heard horns before. He had tasted the way their note changed skin and bone. He had touched the one blown on a different shore whose note wrapped itself around his marrow and demanded. His horn was not that horn, but its note was wrong anyway. His head came up. The eggs knocked against his chest with solid joy. The woman lifted the horn to her mouth and blew. The sound came at him in spirals, a ribbon of command braided with pain, and within it lay words that were not human words, the mouths of the world opening along with the mouth of the horn. The note told him, "Come," told him, "Kneel," told him, "You are ours," told him, "You are a door." He answered wrong. He answered with flame. The note broke under his breath like a toy. The horn grew a red mouth of its own along its side and ate the woman's hand to the wrist. She did not drop it, which inters ted him in some colder part. She held to it while her eyes changed. Her men leapt from the boats onto rock that had never seen their kind. They ran toward him with hooks and nets and words falling from their tongues like broken keys. He lashed out with his wing and sent 2 of them down to the glowing river. He seized the horn with his teeth and snapped it. It wailed a last long word that thickened the air and made the pale vein in the ceiling flicker like a summer sky. Then it died, and the boats showed him their backs. The woman who had blown it lay on her side with her burnt hand tucked under her arm, laughing softly in a language that smelled like cinnamon and ashes. He would have killed her then, but the things in the basin shifted. They weren't eggs then. They were something between eggs and breath, eggs and voice, eggs and hunger. He lay down again, his body covering them like a tent, and he reached his head back, his black jaws hanging open. The woman who had blown the horn watched him and held one sleeve between her teeth, and her eyes did not leave the way his throat worked as he drew heat up from his belly and let it go slow, slow, slow. The red on her mouth softened with sweat and heat, and the color on her throat ran. There was an old crack along the golden shell where the color lay thin. He set his teeth very carefully along that line and thought of a hand in his mane and a word that meant yes, and pressed and breathed and bled. He had not meant to bleed, but his lip had caught on a sharpness the way a man's wrist catches on broken glass. His blood fell along the crack in a dark line that glowed where it touched. The shell sighed. It is not true that dragons sing. They do something to the air that is older than song, a breaking and remaking of what air thinks it is, and in that remaking lies shape and heat and will. But if any of the men who ran now to their boats had been poets and had lived to be old with both hands and both eyes, they would have called what came out of the basin a hymn. The shell parted like bark rolled from a log. A small creature sluiced out, shaking itself as if it were raining. It was not black and not gold, but a color like firelight on oil, iridescent in a way his mind liked better than light itself. It squawked with rage and astonishment and a mad joy at the existence of its throat. And he crooned back, and another shell cracked, and another. The woman laughed again, 3 small sounds exactly like the first, and then the ledge above her let go of its patience and put a knife into her head. She folded as neatly as a letter. The cavern remembered it had spent centuries slowly collapsing and discovered a sudden love for haste. The pale vein in the ceiling looked like ice and was not. It shook. The black rivers below threw sparks and grew teeth. The boats bumped one another like frightened cattle and wedged in the mouth of the cave, the men on them pulling at oars that had no water to find. He stood. The new ones scrambled against the old, their claws ridiculous and eager. One clung to a fold of his throat and bit him with all its will, and then, ashamed by the wrongness of what it had done, licked the place it had bitten with frantic sincerity. He lowered his head and took each new thing into his mouth, one after another, rolling them gently against his tongue, tasting scales and future. He lifted them to his back, setting them where the spines rose from the leather of his harness of skin. They clung there with the fierce stupidity of love. He leapt. Weight was different now. The world came up slower than it should have. He clawed at an updraft with his hands and feet and wings and found another ledge and sprang, and it broke and he fell, and then the world put its hand under him at last. A plank in the mouth broke. A man screamed with his mouth full of wood. Someone struck at his leg with a pike, and the little ones hissed like kindling catching. He reached the sky again like a swimmer breaking from a wave. Outside, the sea drew its breath as if nothing had happened. The little ones screamed at it, outraged that something so big could pretend such innocence. He rose, carrying them into the hot highest air and letting it cool them. The boats came out behind him, rowing with all the strength men can find in themselves. And then something in the slag cliffs above them shifted again, and one mouth of the world closed. He did not go back. The days after were long and strange and new. The little ones were all wrong and perfect. Their bodies gleamed in colors that should not have been possible. Ash scratched their throats, so he taught them how to drink from clouds. He showed them how fish leapt when fire pained the surface, and how the air itself could become a prey if they shaped it right with their wings. He did not feed them men. He did not teach them that men were food. The world was wide and full of food that did not prey before being eaten. Still, men came. They came with nets woven of copper and a hush around their mouths as if silence were a shield. They came with long nails of iron hammered into boards and skins of water and ropes of their hope. They came with little bells to tie on the ankles of their bravest, and with songs that called to gods who did not live there, and with the names of gods that did. They came with old books and boxes sealed with wax, parchments that cracked like biscuits and told them stories about how the right shapes of the mouth had once made the air agree. They came with fear and faith, which have always been the masks men wear when they want to believe they are not afraid. He killed some of them. He ignored others and let the sea judge them. One man did not come at all, and yet he was there. The one with the candle that burned green in a city built of bones and glass learned to look into the sea's wound and see, not only the black dragon with new flame clinging to his back, but the place where the black dragon slept among rocks that smelled of salt and sleep, and the shape of the air above that place when the little ones learned to climb on it. The man with the green candle told another man, who told a woman, and their words went like rats along ropes to ports, and from those mouths came boats, and from those boats came nets, and from those nets came no dragons. The little ones grew into their hunger. They learned the old high circles where wind is a thin blue trick, and they learned the low rolls where a wingtip can skim a wave and make the wave show its white teeth. They learned to love the slap of a fish's tail against their faces, and learned that the belly of a seal tears the way a bag tears when you pull too hard on its knot. They learned to sleep while drifting because the air would remember them, and they learned the dry, hot love of stone. He led them to an island that was shaped like a hand with its fingers spread. At the center of the palm, a bowl of lava baked red bread forever. He taught them to sit with their mouths open until the heat filled them. He taught them to speak to one another the way the dead speak to the dead, through memory, through how they held their wings, through the length of their glances. Their eyes were different, but they were his. When storms came that could not be torn, he folded them under his wings as far as his body could be a house. Lightning cracked down like an accusation and licked his back, and his spine sang for an hour. He sank into the old instinct that said find a cave, and they pressed into the most honest dark they had ever known and learned to count by thunder. In the morning, the sky was as clean as a knife's edge and smelled of iron. Once, high above the burn of the old mountains, he saw a shape larger than any bird, its wings too long and too narrow for anything but what it was. It rode the same wind he rode and made a sound when its throat worked, a low creak like a door in a temple, and it smelled of rot and time. It was not one of his. It had the old look, thin where it should be thin, heavy where it should be heavy, alive in the exact ways he knew. It turned and saw him and opened its mouth, and the shape of its teeth told him stories his blood remembered. The little ones shrieked with a happiness so pure it was almost pain. They made circles for one another in air. They did not touch. They parted on the honesty that the world had more wind than wings to be given. He did not see it again, though sometimes at the edge of sleep he felt a pressure in the air as of some large thing moving, the way a fish feels a ship that does not show itself. And if there had been something left here by a man who once set the world's pieces as if it were a board, a man whose name was still a house the West slept in, none of the little ones knew it. They did not know that deep under the platform of obsidian where their father had bled for them, there lay a niche shaped exactly like the curve of a hand, and within it, wrapped in wire and prayer, a list of names of eggs that had never hatched, and beside it, a key. They did not know that men whispered of Aegon's lost brood, the eggs the conqueror had brought away, hiding them where they might survive what the West could not, and that when he saw that the West had survived him, he had turned his face and never come again. They did not know that all keys go to locks or to mouths. They knew only that the air was good, and the world was wide, and that the Black One who sang at dawn was theirs. North of the wound in the world, where the sea forgot to scream and contented itself with gnawing cliffs to dust, a boy watched them from a headland of broken stone. His boat lay anchored in a cove where the water was green as an old ring, and his father slept in its shade. The boy had cut himself on coral and wrapped moss around the cut to show to the priest later, so he would say words over it. None of that mattered. The sky mattered. He wiped his eyes and counted. After 3, his mouth remembered how to breathe again. He remembered stories that said once the sky over the world had been busy with such things like any market day, and he laughed because that was a story and this was his chest, tripping over a joy so sharp it was almost fear. He watched them turn together, for dark commas on the page of morning, then split and slide apart, then knit again. The largest clap of black light dragged a shadow across half the headland and made the little grasses hide. The boy raised both his hands as if hands could catch anything but rain and cried out something with no words in it. And the largest of the shadows tilted its head and looked at him from very far away and made a small sound in its throat. The boy would remember that all of his life, would weigh it against a child's first breath and the first time he kissed a mouth that liked it, and he would never be sure which weighed more. They did not go west to be counted or named. They burned old air and ate new fish. They left a line of heat like a signature along horizons that had stopped believing in writing. And in places where men who watched the sky the way other men watch water saw them and set ink to parchment and sent gulls of paper across leagues, men began to understand that their old maps were wrong. They had marked the place where the world broke with a careful black. They wanted to put more careful black over that. They could not. The more they wrote, the more the map became all air. When the black dragon slept, he dreamed sometimes of iron steps and a room that wanted. He dreamed sometimes of a hand that smelled like salt and horses and a voice that could tell him yes by how he was held. He dreamed sometimes of the first time he had tasted anything, the taste of his own shell dusted with ash on his tongue. But mostly he dreamed of wind. He grew older into his power, as all true things do. The little ones learned how to be terrible and merciful as appetite dictates, and they learned what he could teach and what could not be taught because it was older than teaching. They learned to love thunder. They learned that the world kept hiding rooms under the rooms under the rooms. They learned that the East could go on until you could no longer tell whether you were going somewhere or just making the place you were larger by the being of you. When one of his brood flew close to a ship and men below fell on their faces and wept, he wheeled above them and thought of teeth and bones and horses and then thought of nothing at all, because what is a thought to a sky? He beat his wings and put out the banners of his shadow and passed over them like a god that has decided, for today, to love. After a long while he went back to the basin of stone. The black river was lower. The pale vein held. The bowl was empty and shone like an eye. He lay where he had lain and set the bones of his chest on warmed rock and closed his eyes. He did not know what had been planned for him. He did not know he had found keys without locks. He did not know he had returned a story to itself. He knew stone. He knew the old smell of it, the way it keeps forever the memory of the last thing that touched it. He pressed his heart to that memory and breathed, deep and long, as if the world were a chest, as if all of this were only the drawing of breath after breath and the patience to see how far breath can go. On air that tasted like coins, his children called to him from outside. He answered, and the cave gave his answer back to him, and the mountain took it still deeper, telling it to things that have forgotten they are listening. Above, the sky moved. Beneath, the earth remembered. Somewhere very far to the west, a man with a candle looked away from his glass and shut his eyes because the thing he had seen was too true to look at for long. Somewhere very far to the north, another man walked beneath leafless trees with a sword that was a road, and hunger walked beside him on soft feet. Somewhere, a woman laughed into her sleeve. He slept in the bowl where names had been stored, his wings half open like a shelter, his mouth cracked in what might have been a smile, and when the breath in the mountain changed, he woke with a start and went to the air again. Because the only answer a dragon knows for any question the world asks him is yes, and yes is another word for flight. He flew. They came for him before dawn, when night is thinnest and rooms remember they are only rooms. The chill of the black cell had seeped into his bones and made his thoughts slow. The torch held by the spider's boy threw gold on the stone, and where that gold stopped the dark lay like a thinking thing. Eddard Stark rose because the man with the soft shoes asked him to. His bad leg bit him above the knee. Every step reminded him of a spear in the river and a horse's panic and a boy he had failed. He put his hand to the wall because it was there. He did not ask questions. He had learned long ago that some kinds of asking only bring back answers you cannot hold. "This way, my lord," the boy murmured, though no one in that place was a lord. "Quickly now." The boy smelled of fear held in check and potatoes cooked with onions. Men can crawl through a city as vinegar crawls through a rag. Ned let himself be taken. They passed throats of stone and brick shoulders. They went through a door that had the humility not to creak. The hall beyond it held baskets and brooms and a pile of kindling that had seen too many winters to feel proud of the work still left in it. The boy crouched and lifted a board. A breath of air came through that hole that had not lived in the black cells. It smelled of horses and cold iron and dung and the promise of rain. Ned closed his eyes a moment. When he opened them, his daughter's face was there, the older one, with her mouth full of courage too large for any Southron room, and he had to stand very still because even to remember the weight of her head on his chest when she was 3 years old could change a man's feet. Yoren's rough hand caught his arm in the dark and steered him through the hole and into a cistern's throat that had grown slippery with centuries of use and forgetting. "You walk as a man walks who has a debt," Yoren said under his breath, which was as close as he could come to the truth of it. Ned did not waste breath on answer. He put his faith, as he had put it so many times, in stone that held, in men with simple purposes, in darkness that hid what it had to hide. They came up like ghosts in a yard that belonged to no one. A gray horse chewed at a post. The first light bruised the east above the roofs, a deep purple that looked like a bruise on skin. Ned pulled the cheap cloak over his shirt, feeling the itch of it against wounds not yet knit. Yoren shoved a black cap down on his hair. He looked like a man on the road. He looked like someone who would be passed by on a king's road crowded with mule carts and bad intentions. "Keep your head down," the boy with onions on his breath said, his voice cresting in relief like a tide just making the rocks. He was all eyes. Ned wished him a son who would live to see him old and said, "Keep your own." They put him in the last of a line of boys on their way to a wall that had never seemed so far from any man's hand. He became Jack or Tom or another name picked up off the floor of a tavern. He became the habit of silence. He learned to move as men move when they hope the world has forgotten them. The King's Road reached for them like a long gray tongue. They went north, 3 days out, before the place where the road passes between hedges that have held dry sparrows' nests for years. Gold cloaks took the hedge itself and came out of it like a spring. Yoren leaned forward in his saddle. Nd said a word that wasn't a word, and the boys scattered the way leaves scatter from a gust. Ned's hands found the knife he had not known he carried and discovered that knowing a thing with the mind is only worth as much as what a body knows under it. He has always been a man who believed you cut tangles with the simplest blade you had. He cut through to the ditch, slid down it, felt the half-healed leg scream, pressed his face into mud that smelled of old rain and roots. Above him he heard Yoren's voice gone flat as a road. "You'll find naught but crow food here, lads." A boot came down inches from Ned's fingers and sent up a spray of ditch smell. He held his breath and cut it in half. They lost 2 boys that day. The names of those boys would not leave the inside of Ned's skull for months. He would think of their shoes. The Riverlands wore their grief openly, and in that, Ned understood them better than he understood the South. Dead cattle lay in ditches. Smoke drew straight lines into sky that did not change course for them. farmers watched him with the steady eyes of men who have learned what a man can be when another man wants something. At a crossroad the wind shifted and a stink of cooked pig and burned wheat rode it. Some lord's hall that had not been built well enough for flame. Yoren did not turn his head. He chewed and spat and kept the column moving. Ned had time for thoughts then, and he spent them like coins he might run out of. He thought of Sansa in a high room, the south pressing its golden mouth to her hand. He thought of Arya, moving through shadows like smoke. If she lived, if the gods had not decided to measure his life in daughters lost. He thought of Catelyn, her name an ache beneath his breastbone. He thought of Robb's face the last time he had seen it, boy and man arguing along the shoulders. He thought of a raven's letter he had not answered and of the old weight of a sword at his hip and the old weight of a promise given at a bedside that smelled of blood and milk and fear. At an inn where someone had once loved the idea of yellow paint. Men in rough gray cloaks waited for them in a corner they made their own by the way they held themselves. One of them rose and went outside without looking at anyone, and Yoren's mouth tightened into a line that meant he had chosen, weeks ago, and now the choosing would present itself. They finished their thin soup and went after him. The yard had a cart dragged into its corner like a drunk asleep on his own porch. Behind it, in its shadow, a man waited with a horse he had no business on with that limp and that jaw that would never again lie flat. The horse lifted its head when it smelled him and made a small sound that struck at some old bell in him. Ned put his hand on the horse's nose. The horse sighed, accepting this as the way of the world, and in that there was mercy. "Lord," the man said very softly. Then he smiled, which took courage. "Forgive me, my lord. There are ears even in empty yards." "How far?" Ned asked only those two words, because his voice had not climbed any ladder of strength yet. 2 days if our luck holds. 1 if gods remember their old men. The man's face lifted to his for a moment, and Ned recognized him beyond dirt and beard. A fry man once, not so long ago. Men defect from houses the way rain defects from clouds. They rode night and day through country that had learned to watch without being seen. They left the boys to the wall and to Yoren and to the road. Ned did not say farewell. There are partings you hold like stones, and there are partings you let the road take out of your hands. On the second night, men found them in a throat of old oaks and asked for everything. Ned gave them the look he had used once before in another wood when another boy's death hung in the air like frost. The men took what that look offered them, fear in the shape of practicality, and left. Beyond the oaks the road fell toward water. The water caught starlight like straw. He smelled a hall. He smelled a river's patience. He smelled his own house in the scent of wet leaves, because the north is a thought that breeds itself wherever it can. They came into the arms of the Tullus like men who remember how to be received. Riverrun was a mother with a walled heart. Torches guttered on the walls. The first look that found Ned was like being caught between weather and hope. It belonged to a woman who had learned early to smile at men's folly and only learned, late, when those men grew wise, to love their certainty. Catelyn walked slow toward him because speed at such moments can break fragile things. He put his hand out as if he could stop time by touching it. She put her hand in his and made it true to itself again. Later, Robb stood in the chamber where a boy had slept with a dog at the end of his bed and looked at his father as if looking could put him back in a world that had made more sense to him. They said, "The boy began and ended and began again. They said you were." "I am here," Ned said, which had to be enough for now. Councils are a way for men to spread weight out until no one feels its full shape. They sat in one. The great John thumped the board with the flat of his hand and laughed in a way that made men want to go out and find something to fear so they could teach it a lesson. Roose Bolton said very little and let men measure themselves against the quiet. The Mallisters spoke like gentry with old silver spoons. Old Lord Tully was thinner than memory, and his eyes had the glass on them that hills get after snow. The words went around like geese alarmed on a river. Joffrey, Queen, heads, hostages, a South that wants to be loved for its theft. Ned let them finish. When the sound had tired itself, he said, "If I ride south with any banner above me, my daughter dies. If I strike here, my daughter dies." If I ask for honor, they will give me a head and call it generosity. So we will not ask. We will go north. North! The Greyjoy's eyebrows leapt like startled crows. With winter licking our heels and every Lannister dog snapping at our backs? We go north, Ned said, and the room learned something about the shape of the word decision. We go north because the sea has remembered the Iron Islands and will give Balon dreams again. We go north because boys climbed a tower they should not have climbed and fell, and men pushed a knife where it should not have gone. We go north because the wall sends ravens, and I have forgotten how to forgive myself for forgetting what they say. Roose Bolton tilted his head very slightly, as if he were a man listening for a moth in a linen chest. Revenge is a southern luxury, my lord. In the north you have only necessity. That is why we will do it, Ned said. As necessity. They moved like the thaw moves through a field, slow, inexorable, leaving wreckage that looks like relief. They stepped around the Lannister host like water steps around a rock when there is room enough to do it and force enough to push back. Tywin sent riders to pluck at their edges. They sent the riders back with their mounts and their heads still attached and a letter in the riders' boots saying simply no. They left men along the Green Fork to teach the river to be an ally and sent messages across moors that only men of the north can make speak. They did not conquer, they ignored. At the neck they found the king's hand cannot reach as far as his banners wanted to. Reed men came out of fog like sticks deciding to be men and looked up into Ned's face and smiled with all their teeth. One of them gave him a frog pressed in leaf and jelly. For luck, the man said with complete seriousness. Thank you, Ned said, and meant it. Moat Cailin rose out of the land like a scar. They passed it, and with each mile the road remembered more about its old self. A cold rain set in, the kind that makes a man feel old before his time. Ned wore it. He had learned the use of discomfort. Discomfort teaches you to hold your jaw and keep your feet. The ravens found them on the white knife. The first letter smelled of salt and a woman's haste. The second smelled of old wax and fish. The third smelled of smoke, old and new. He read them and put them under his belt. He said nothing for an hour. Then he said to the air, "The boy took Winterfell." "Theon?" Catelyn asked with a calm that wanted to be belief and might, given time, have learned to be. "The boy," Ned said. "We taught him in our way. It was not the way that could hold him against his blood." He handed her the letter. She read it and set her teeth. The road bent along a black pine grove so old the trees had learned to lean away from one another. Ned stopped there and put his hand on the bark and said, "All gods hear me. I have done foolishness. I have done mercy. I have done what men call wrong and what men call right, and you have not sent lightning. If space remains in your hearts for men who cannot tell where gray ends, give me force enough to spare what can be spared and cut what must be cut." He did not know if gods listened, but men learn sometimes that what they say aloud matters because they hear themselves. They split their host like a man splits logs. Wyman Manderley took his slower, heavier men east toward the water, his wagons groaning under salt beef and stubbornness. The Umbers grinned and took the long, fast line up through the Wolfswood. Meege Mormont led women who had spears and the look in their mouths that says we can bear more than children. Robb begged for the flanking run, and Ned said no, and Robb held his breath and said, "Yes, father." Because there are battles you win by obeying too. He went himself to Winterfell with a picked lot. A quiet lot, the kind of men who are there when you need them and not otherwise. They came to their own walls as strangers. It is a strange flavor on the tongue, to stand outside the place that made you and taste it as if it were someone else's fruit. Theon Greyjoy had posted men on the walls and boys in the towers, and the boys were afraid and hard-eyed in the way of boys with their first swords. A banner that knew nothing about the gods of the north hung above the gates. It had been made in haste. Haste shows. They watched the walls as a hunter watches a field. They watched men's habits until those habits turned into doors. They watched the way the guard's change was called. They watched who drank where and how much and who pushed whom on the stair. They counted arrows in quivers. They listened to a boy piss with fear and not know he could be heard because he had never needed to be quiet his whole life. They found their door on the third night, when two boys sent to fetch more firewood decided to be honest about how late it was and went to sleep in the woodshed, their mouths open like birds. They came through a little postern near the kitchens where old women had once sent pies to cool on a stool. There was blood, because there is always blood when men push one another in the dark. Ned took none of it with his own hands if he could help it. He ran the corridor that runs along the inner wall and smelled the rushes and the damp stone and the old ghost of his father's voice. He came into the great hall, where Theon Greyjoy sat in a lord's chair with his legs set wide and an anger in his mouth that smelled of fear and boy. The room held its breath. "Stand," Ned said, and his voice filled the hall the way dawn fills a room, simply by being itself. The boys holding halberds at Theon's shoulder looked at one another, and in that tiny look there was a world. Theon stood because his legs did as he told them, and because you cannot let an older man see you sit when the oldest parts of you know he has a right to ask you to stand. "You taught me to string a bow," Theon said. "You taught me to fork a fish. You taught me to ride. You taught me to laugh with my mouth closed when men were foolish. You did not teach me how to be from here." He spread his hands, which had learned callous and still looked like a boy's hands in that chair. "I am from there. You are here now," Ned said. He had not slept in 3 days. He had dreamed of snow he could not melt and of a girl with a sword and of the smell of leeks in the kitchen when Cat was hungry. And here there are laws. Put the sword down. Theon looked at the sword, which had always looked better leaning by another man's chair. He looked at Ned. He set the sword on the floor because putting it down would have meant something else, something he could not give. His chin lifted like a boy who will not weep because there are men watching who would laugh and boys watching who would copy him. "What will you do with me?" he asked, and his voice said, "I was a child and you were a winter I did not understand." "I will keep you," Ned said, "and when the sea is calm again, I will let the sea judge you, because men have too many kinds of judging and the sea only knows drowning and not drowning." "You will keep me?" Theon said with a little laugh like a bubble rising from mud. "Like a hawk? Like a dog? Like a son until you show me you will not be one," Ned said. He meant it and did not know whether meaning mattered. They sent Theon with 6 men to White Harbor under night and rain, with a letter sewn into his collar that Wyman Manderley would unpick with his fat white fingers and read and sweat and smile over, because Wyman loved a letter that gave him a way to be lawful and devious at once. Ned took the chair again without sitting in it. He went to the godswood and put his hand to the bark that had held him when he was young. He closed his eyes hard, and the red leaves made the sound they make when wind passes through them the right way, and the old face in the bark gave him nothing because gods give nothing you don't already have and don't want. In the days that followed, he did the work of mending. He did it as a man mends a boot, awkwardly, thoroughly. He sent men to the bar Rolands with silver and demands. He sent girls with letters because sometimes girls pass where boys are watched. He spoke with Meej Mormont about the Ironborn on Bear Island and learned to let a woman tell him the shape of a thing without telling the shape back to her. He sent word to the wall with gifts of grain that would be a better kind of loyalty than any he had sent the south. His men found 2 boys in the ruins of an old mill beyond the walls. The boys were shaken thin but whole, and one of them had a wolf following him who had learned to move like the boy moves, so they would not be parted. The gods give back what they can when men have not yet squandered it all. The writs from the south came in like sleet. One promised pardon and lordship for the head of Eddard Stark. One promised lands and marriages and titles squared atop titles if the north would only remember where now the sun rose. One promised Sansa's fingers one by one if he did not present himself in chains within a span of days best measured by a man with a sundial for a soul. Ned read them while standing. He put them in the fire while standing. He did not watch them burn. Roose Bolton rode into Winterfell under a white banner with a sigil so faint you might have thought the cloth had been rubbed with chalk by accident. His face had learned to be kind to strangers. He bowed to the weirwood before he bowed to the lord of the house because such courtesies cost nothing and confuse some men into thinking kindness where there is only habit. "My lord," he said with even temperature, "you have done the work. You have done it swiftly." To another man's ear it might have sounded like praise. "We have more yet to mend," Ned said. The Ironborn have their claws in Deepwood and their teeth in Torrens Square. Manderley's ships can push them from the east, but the west is our own labor. I am a man who enjoys labor when it ends, Roose said. If there was a smile, it was not where smiles live. The peace they made with the South was not a peace any man could name. It was a list of absences. There were no southern banners in the forests. There were no gold cloaks at the ford. There was no head on a spike above Winterfell's gate. There were no ravens sent from Riverrun that asked more than they were owed. Sansa remained in her gilded room, polished like a coin by hands that thought they knew value. Ned sent her letters with words that said, I am alive and I am moving, and only so many I love yous as will not make a girl into a candle. He did not write the words I am sorry because he had learned, too late, that those words can be a man's way of washing his hands with everyone else's tears. Winter knelt closer. Men began to speak of it in sentences instead of as a rumor. Black brothers came down in 2s and 3s to ask for corn and for boys, and they brought, not tales as men bring when they want you to be amused, but reports. The dead walk, they said without saying those exact words, because saying those exact words changes the air. The dead walk, and they do not ask permission, and they do not recognize bread. Ned listened with his hands folded as if in prayer and asked only for the shape of their steps. Fast, one of them said, his voice a crack in old wood. They move fast. He gathered his people in the great hall and spoke to them not as a lord and not as a father, but as something older that had lived in men before any such names. He told them of walls and wood and wind. He told them where they would put their grain and where their eyes. He told them that the South had always thought winter a story the North told to keep its pride warm, and that there is no heat in pride. He told them they would share what they had with men in black, because if the wall fails, there will be no men to share with, only mouths. He said nothing of revenge because he had learned the weight of that word and the emptiness that hides under it. Still, revenge came to his door wearing its better clothes. Wyman Manderley sent a cart carved with little dolphins and a letter carved with little knives. He had unpicked Theon Greyjoy's collar and found, not only the letter Ned had put there, but a letter sewn inside that letter, written by a man who had thought himself cautious and had thought himself safe. It had Roose Bolton's seal. It did not ask much. Only the North, only patience, only a good marriage and a quiet knife. Ned read it with a face he had learned to wear when men were looking to him to see how afraid they were allowed to be. He took the letter to the godswood and put it into the mouth of a knot at the base of the tree and let it sit there. He went back and had a fire lit in the hall and had the benches filled and had the doors shut. He called Roose Bolton to him and showed him the quiet of a man whose home has been invaded by a type of cold that does not thaw. Roose looked at the letter as if it were a bird he might coax down from a branch. Ink spreads, he said, gentle as a wet cloth. So do intentions, Ned said. He did not call for guards. He did not have Roose seized and dragged and made to sing. He sent for bread and salt and gave it to the man he had just learned the truth of, because a man can be many things at once and still not be permitted to be some things, here in this hall under this roof. He said, You will go. You will go with only what you can carry. You will go with no man of mine at your back. He lowered his voice, which made the words heavier. If you turn to look at this door, sorrow will find you. It walks faster than anything. Roose went. He went with a look on his face like a man who has counted the knives in a room and found none of them particularly sharp. He did not make it 2 days. Meege Mormont brought back an empty horse. No one cheered. You do not cheer winter. You prepare for it. When, in the first thick snow, the Ironborn tried the walls again at Deepwood, they found women with spears who knew where to put a spear so that it stops a man who has never been stopped in his life. They found men with long memories. They found a sea that had decided, this year, to hate small boats. When ravens came from the wall with ice in their breath, Ned sent men and women and grain and furs. He sent casks of hard drink, because men are not casks and break without certain oils. He sent maesters with herbs and knives. He sent instructions for where to put the dead, which is a kind of love a lord owes when love must be practical. He sat with maps until the lines rose to meet his eyes. He had a fire laid in the great hearth and did not stand too near it. He went to the yard and took up a wooden sword and let Rob hit him and corrected his boy's foot. He went to his daughters in letters and to his sons in bread and to his people in attention. He went to the godswood and did not say I am afraid because he did not need to say it for it to be true. On a morning when the light came late and blew through the high windows, he woke before the hall and put on his cloak and went out. The yard held the mint-snap of cold. His breath rose and briefed the air and died. He walked to the heart tree and stood before it. The face in the bark looked like a thing carved by the patient knife of weather. It did not love him. It held him. Revenge, he said into the quiet, is for men who think they can make old wrongs move backward. I am not a man who believes in backward. His breath hung in the air between him and the tree as words do when they are all a man can do. But I will not forget. I will not forgive where forgiving would be only a man's way of washing his own hands. I will keep what is mine. I will keep it for them, for the ones who have gone past being kept. And when cold knocks on my door with a hand that does not bleed, I will open, and I will show him the way into the fire. The weirwood said nothing. The snow broke in little sighs as it fell off a branch. Somewhere in the castle a boy laughed in his sleep. Somewhere a gate creaked. Somewhere, far to the south, a woman set down a cup and picked it up again and did not drink. Somewhere to the east, above a sea that smokes in its sleep, for shadows crossed the face of the sun. He did not know that. He did not need to. He turned his face north, which was the only way he has known to turn it. He began again, as men who live long have to learn to begin again, every morning, making a place for his children to stand, holding the wall with hands that would ache later, drawing breath and then another and another, as if breath were something he could give and never run out, and as if that would be enough.